The fluorescent lights in Westfield High's library hummed their familiar tune as I hunched over my calculus textbook, highlighter bleeding yellow across derivatives and integrals. 3 weeks until graduation, 2 weeks until final exams, and exactly 14 days until either Sarah Chen or I would be named valedictorian at commencement. "Still cramming, Maya?" Sarah's voice carried that familiar note of false sweetness as she slid into the seat across from me. Her perfectly straightened black hair fell like a curtain as she leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of her expensive vanilla perfume, kind my family could never afford. I looked up from my textbook, meeting her dark eyes. "Just reviewing. You know how it is." Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, I know exactly how it is. The pressure must be incredible, being so close to something you've wanted your entire life, only to watch it slip away in the final stretch." My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice level. "The same could be said about you." We'd been locked in this academic arms race since freshman year, trading the top spot in our class rankings like it was a game of ping pong. Sarah had the advantage of private tutors and parents who could afford every AP prep book on the market. I had stubbornness, a part-time job at the local diner, and a single mother who worked double shifts to keep us afloat. "Actually," Sarah said, pulling out her phone to check her reflection in the black screen, "I'm feeling pretty confident about these finals, especially the history exam on Friday. Did you know Mr. Peterson uses the same essay questions every year? He just rotates them." My stomach dropped, but I tried not to let it show. The AP history exam was worth 30% of our final grade, enough to tip the scales in either direction. That's interesting. "Isn't it?" Sarah's smile widened. "Of course, I would never share that kind of information. That would be cheating." She stood up, slinging her designer backpack over her shoulder. "See you Friday, Maya. May the best student win." As she walked away, her heels clicking against the library floor, I felt the familiar burn of injustice in my chest. Sarah had every advantage money could buy, and now she had inside information too? It wasn't fair, but then again, when had life ever been fair to people like me? I packed up my books and headed home to our cramped apartment above the Chinese restaurant where Mom worked. The smell of frying oil and garlic had long since seeped into our furniture, our clothes, everything we owned. Mom was already asleep on the couch, still wearing her work uniform, her face lined with exhaustion. I draped a blanket over her and went to my room, where my acceptance letter to Columbia sat framed on my desk, contingent on maintaining my academic standing and receiving the Westfield Merit Scholarship that came with being valedictorian. Without that scholarship, Columbia was just a beautiful dream I couldn't afford. That night, I dreamed of walking across the graduation stage as Sarah's name was called instead of mine, watching my future dissolve into nothing. Friday morning arrived, gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I'd spent the entire week cramming for the history exam, reviewing every possible essay topic Mr. Peterson might choose. Sarah, meanwhile, had seemed relaxed and confident, as if she didn't have a care in the world. The exam was scheduled for first period. I arrived early, taking my usual seat in the third row, center. Sarah strolled in just before the bell, looking immaculate as always in her crisp white blouse and designer jeans. She caught my eye and winked. Mr. Peterson, a tall man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, stood at the front of the classroom with a stack of exam booklets. "Good morning, class. As you know, this exam will count for 30% of your final grade. You have 90 minutes to complete 3 essay questions. Please write your name clearly on the cover of your exam booklet." He began distributing the blue books, moving methodically down each row. When he reached my desk, he handed me a booklet with a slight nod. He'd always been one of my favorite teachers, and I knew he was rooting for me. "You may begin," Mr. Peterson announced, returning to his desk. I opened my exam booklet and felt my heart sink. The 3 essay questions were ones I'd barely studied, focusing instead on the topics I thought were most likely based on previous year's patterns. Meanwhile, 2 desks over, Sarah was already writing furiously, her face bright with confidence. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to breathe. I could do this. I'd worked too hard to give up now. The next 90 minutes passed in a blur of frantic writing. I drew on every piece of knowledge I could remember, crafting arguments from fragments of readings and half-remembered lecture notes. By the time Mr. Peterson called time. My hand was cramping and I felt like I'd just run a marathon. Please close your booklets and pass them forward, he instructed. As we filed out of the classroom, Sarah fell into step beside me. How do you think you did? She asked, but her tone was different, now less confident, almost nervous. I don't know, I admitted. Those questions were harder than I expected. Sarah stopped walking abruptly. What questions did you have? I recited the 3 prompts from memory, watching as Sarah's face went progressively paler. What's wrong? I asked. Those weren't the questions I prepared for, she whispered. A cold realization began to dawn. What questions did you prepare for? Sarah rattled off 3 completely different essay topic zones that would have been much easier for me to answer. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. Sarah, I said slowly, what exactly did you hear about the exam questions? Her face crumpled. My mom. She knows someone who works in the district office. They said Peterson always uses the same rotation, and this year should have been. She trailed off, looking sick. The questions you prepared for, I finished. She nodded miserably. I don't understand. I was so sure. But I was beginning to understand, and what I was realizing made my blood run cold. If Sarah had prepared for different question zones, that would have been easier for both of you, Sand. If she was as shocked as I was by the actual exam content, then someone had deliberately led her astray. Or worse. As we walked toward our next class, a terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. I thought about Sarah's confidence all week, her relaxed demeanor, her certainty that she would ace the exam. I thought about how nervous she looked now, how different her reaction was from what I'd expected. What if the questions had been switched? What if someone had given Sarah false information about what would be on the exam, ensuring she'd be unprepared, while… No, that was paranoid thinking. Who would even have access to the exam questions? And why would they help me? But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would only grow stronger in the days to come. The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the history exam, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Sarah had seemed genuinely shocked by the questions, which didn't match her usual confidence when she had inside information. Monday morning brought our graded exams back. Mr. Peterson called us up individually to collect our blue books, which meant no one else could see our scores. When he handed me mine, his eyes crinkled with what looked like pride. I opened to the last page with trembling fingers. 94-100, N.A. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by guilt. If Sarah had been as unprepared as she seemed, she might have failed, which would certainly cost her the valedictorian spot. Despite our rivalry, I didn't want to win because she'd been sabotaged. I watched as Sarah approached Mr. Peterson's desk, her usual confident stride replaced by hesitant steps. She took her exam booklet with visibly shaking hands and opened to the last page. Her face went white. After class, I caught up with her in the hallway. Sarah, how did you do? She looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and desperate. 78, she whispered. I got a 78, Maya. Do you know what this means? I did know. With our GPAs as close as they were, that 16-point difference would almost certainly cost her the valedictorian position. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Sorry? Sarah's voice rose, drawing stares from other students. You're sorry? This doesn't make any sense, Maya. I was told those questions would be on the exam. Someone promised me. She cut herself off, realizing she'd said too much. Promised you what? I asked quietly. Sarah's face cycled through emotions, anger, fear, desperation. Finally, she seemed to deflate. Nothing. It doesn't matter now. But it did matter, and that night I couldn't stop thinking about her reaction. Someone had definitely given Sarah inside information about the exam, but it had been wrong. Either her source had made a mistake, or someone had deliberately fed her false information. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something deliberate had happened. But who would do such a thing? And why would they want to help me? I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the knock on our apartment door. Mom was still at work, so I answered it myself, surprised to find Mrs. Patterson, our downstairs neighbor, holding a manila envelope. This was slipped under my door by mistake, she said, handing it to me. It's addressed to you. I thanked her and closed the door, examining the envelope. My name was written on the front in block letters, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short typed message. Maya, you deserve this more than she does. Sometimes the universe needs a little help ensuring justice is served. Congratulations on your future success. A friend. My hands began to shake. Someone had definitely interfered with the exam, and they'd done it to help me. But who and how? I thought about everyone who might have access to the exam questions. Mr. Peterson himself, obviously, but he would never cheat for a student. The department head maybe, or someone in the administration office. A janitor who might have access to the teacher's lounge after hours. Or another student. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. What if another student had somehow gotten access to the real exam questions and then fed Sarah false information while making sure I studied the right material? But that didn't make sense either. I hadn't known what questions would be on the exam any more than Sarah had. Unless... I ran to my desk and pulled out my history notebook, flipping through the pages frantically. There, in the margin of my notes from 2 weeks ago, was a small star next to 3 topics. I'd marked them because something had made me think they might be important, but I couldn't remember what. Had someone subtly directed my studying without me realizing it? A comment from a classmate, a suggestion from a teacher, an overheard conversation in the hallway? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how easy it would be to manipulate someone's studying if you knew the right way to go about it. A casual mention here, a suggestion there, all designed to feel natural and coincidental. I was being helped by someone, and I had no idea who or why. Tuesday at lunch, I found Sarah sitting alone in the cafeteria, picking at a salad she clearly had no appetite for. Her usual circle of friends was notably absent, probably giving her space to process her academic setback. I approached her table hesitantly. Mind if I sit? She looked up, and I was shocked by how different she looked. Gone was the polished, confident girl I'd known for 4 years. In her place sat someone who looked lost and defeated. Why? She asked. Come to gloat? No, I said, sitting down across from her. I want to know what happened with the exam. Sarah laughed bitterly. You want to know? Fine. My mom has a friend who works in the district office. She's helped me before, not with answers, just with knowing what format the test would be in, what types of questions to expect, general stuff. She took a sip of water, her hand still shaking slightly. This time, she said she'd gotten a look at Peterson's exam questions and could tell me what they were. She gave me 3 specific topics to focus on. I spent the entire week studying just those topics, Maya. I barely glanced at anything else because I was so confident. And the topics she gave you weren't on the exam, I said. Not even close. It's like she deliberately gave me the wrong information. Sarah's voice broke slightly. But why would she do that? She's known me since I was little. She was at my last birthday party. I felt a chill run down my spine. What's her name? Janet Morrison. She works in curriculum development. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I keep thinking I must have misunderstood what she told me, but I wrote it all down. I have notes. Can I see them? Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through her notes app. She showed me the screen, and there in black and white were 3 essay topics that would have been much easier than what we'd actually been tested on. Sarah, I said carefully, did you tell anyone else about this information? Of course not. Why would I help the competition? She paused, studying my face. Why are you asking all these questions? You almost seem like you know something. I made a decision. Pulling out the anonymous note I'd received, I slid it across the table to her. Sarah read it twice, her expression growing more confused with each word. Someone helped you cheat? She asked. I don't know. I didn't ask for help, and I didn't know I was getting any. But this note suggests that someone interfered with the exam on my behalf. Sarah stared at the note for a long moment. Maya, what if the same person who sent you this note is the one who gave my mom's friend the wrong information? The possibility had occurred to me, but hearing Sarah's voice, it made it feel more real. But who would do that? And how would they even know about your connection to the district office? I don't know, but we need to find out. Sarah's voice was stronger now, her shock giving way to determination. This isn't just about the valedictorian spot anymore. Someone played both of us, and I want to know who. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time in 4 years, Sarah and I were on the same side. Where do we start? I asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking, Janet Morrison. If someone fed her false information, she might remember who it was or how she got it. We need to talk to her. Will she talk to us? She'll talk to me. The question is what we do with what we find out. That afternoon, Sarah and I drove to the district office in her BMW ride that felt surreal after years of competition. The building was a bland, beige structure that housed the administrative offices for all the schools in our district. Janet Morrison turned out to be a pleasant woman in her 50s with graying brown hair and kind eyes. When she saw Sarah, her face immediately fell. "Oh, sweetie," she said, pulling Sarah into a hug. "I heard about the exam. I'm so sorry. I don't understand what happened." Sarah extracted herself from the hug. "That's actually why we're here, Mrs. Morrison. I need to know exactly how you got those exam questions." Mrs. Morrison looked confused. "How I got them? Sarah, what do you mean?" "Someone told you what would be on Mr. Peterson's history exam, and they told you wrong. I need to know who that someone was." Mrs. Morrison's face went pale. "Sarah, I never said I had the actual exam questions. I just told you what topics were likely to be covered based on the curriculum standards we'd reviewed." Sarah and I exchanged glances. "But you were so specific," Sarah said. "You gave me exact essay prompts." "No, I didn't." Mrs. Morrison's voice was firm. "I would never do that, and I certainly wouldn't have access to individual teachers' exams. I just suggested some broad topic areas that seemed likely based on what I knew about the AP History curriculum." Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling to her notes. "But I wrote down exactly what you told me." She trailed off, staring at her phone. Then she looked up at Mrs. Morrison with a stricken expression. "Mrs. Morrison, when did we have this conversation?" "Last Tuesday at your mother's book club meeting. We talked for maybe 5 minutes while you were picking up your mom." Sarah's face went white. "Last Tuesday? But these notes are from Wednesday." She showed me her phone. The notes were indeed dated Wednesday, the day after her conversation with Mrs. Morrison. "Sarah," I said quietly, "who else was at that book club meeting?" Her hands were shaking again. I don't remember everyone. There were maybe 8 or 10 people there." "Think," I urged. "Who else from school might have been there? Any parents of kids in our class?" Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating. "Mrs. Patterson was there. And Mrs. Chenwaite. That's my mom. Mrs. Rodriguez. Oh, God." "What?" "Maya. Mrs. Jenkins was there. Danny Jenkins' mom." My stomach dropped. Danny Jenkins was in our AP History class, a solid B student who had never shown any particular interest in academic competition. But he also had a massive crush on me that he'd never bothered to hide. "Do you think he could have?" "I don't know," Sarah said, "but we both knew we needed to find out." Finding Danny Jenkins wasn't difficult, was exactly where he always was after school, in the computer lab working on some programming project. When Sarah and I walked in together, his face went through a complex series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and what looked like guilt. "Hey, Maya," he said, studiously avoiding looking at Sarah. "What's up?" I sat down in the chair next to him while Sarah positioned herself on his other side. Danny was trapped, and he knew it. "Danny," I said gently, "we need to ask you about something." His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Okay." "Your mom was at Mrs. Chen's book club last Tuesday night," Sarah said. "She would have heard the conversation between me and Mrs. Morrison about the history exam." Danny's face went red, but he didn't deny it. "Did you overhear your mom talking about it when she got home?" I asked. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Danny," my voice was firm now, "did you somehow get access to the real exam questions?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Peterson leaves his computer unlocked sometimes during lunch." He was getting old and had started saving all his exam questions in a folder called Tests on his desktop. My heart sank. "Danny, what did you do?" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I just wanted to help you. You work so hard, Maya, and Sarah has every advantage. It wasn't fair that she was getting inside information when you had to study everything." "So you decided to level the playing field?" Sarah's voice was ice cold. Danny finally looked at her. "I knew what topics Mrs. Morrison had suggested to you, so I looked at the real exam questions and made sure Maya studied the right things." "How?" I demanded. "I asked you about those topics during study group. I mentioned them in conversations. I even left some of Peterson's old exams on the library table where I knew you'd find them, ones that had similar questions. Danny's voice was getting smaller with each confession. I just dropped hints. I never directly told you what would be on the test. I felt sick. Danny, do you realize what you've done? You've compromised the integrity of the entire exam. And you've ruined my future, Sarah added, her voice breaking. Danny looked between us, tears starting to form in his eyes. I thought I was helping. Maya, you deserve to be valedictorian. You've worked harder than anyone. That's not your decision to make. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. You've turned my achievement into a lie. Even if I worked hard, even if I earned this, now it's tainted because you cheated for me. But you didn't know, Danny protested. You studied on your own, you wrote your own answers. It doesn't matter, Sarah said firmly. The playing field wasn't level. Maya had an unfair advantage, even if she didn't know it. I looked at Danny, this boy who had thought he was being noble, who had sabotaged both Sarah and me in his misguided attempt to help. Did anyone else know about this? He shook his head. Just me. And the anonymous note? I wanted you to know that someone believed in you. I thought it would make you feel good about your success. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the situation crushing down on me. When I opened them again, both Sarah and Danny were looking at me expectantly. We have to report this, I said. Danny went white. Maya, no. Please, I'll get expelled. My college admission will be revoked. You should have thought of that before you decided to hack into our teacher's computer, Sarah said, but there was less venom in her voice now. She looked as tired as I felt. Danny, I said quietly, what you did was wrong. You violated Mr. Peterson's trust, you compromised the exam, and you put both Sarah and me in an impossible position. There have to be consequences. Danny buried his face in his hands. I know, I thought if you became valedictorian, maybe you'd notice me. Maybe you'd see how much I believe in you. My heart broke a little at the desperation in his voice, but it didn't change what he'd done. Danny, I need you to understand something. What you did wasn't romantic or noble. It was a violation of everything I've worked for. My integrity means more to me than any title. So what happens now? Sarah asked. I took a deep breath. Now we go to Mr. Peterson and tell him everything. All of us together. Mr. Peterson's classroom was empty when we knocked on his door at 4:30 that afternoon. He looked surprised to see the three of us together. Sarah and I had never been friends, and Danny rarely spoke up in class unless called upon. Come in, he said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. What can I do for you? I looked at Sarah and Danny, took a deep breath, and began, Mr. Peterson, we need to tell you something about the history exam. His expression grew serious as I explained everything: Danny's unauthorized access to his computer, the manipulation of our studying, Sarah's false information from Mrs. Morrison, and the anonymous note. Danny sat silent throughout my explanation, occasionally nodding when I looked to him for confirmation. When I finished, Mr. Peterson was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Danny. Mr. Jenkins, is this account accurate? Yes, sir, Danny whispered. And you accessed my computer without permission? Yes, sir. Mr. Peterson's face was grave. Do you understand the seriousness of what you've done? Danny nodded, tears streaming down his face. Ms. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Peterson continued, I appreciate you coming forward with this information, even though it puts your own academic standings at risk. What happens now? Sarah asked. Mr. Peterson rubbed his temples, looking every one of his 58 years. I need to report this to the administration immediately. There will be an investigation, and the consequences will be severe. What about our exam scores? I asked. That will be up to the administration to decide. At minimum, you'll both need to retake the exam under supervised conditions. Mr. Jenkins. He paused, looking at Danny with something that might have been pity. You'll be facing disciplinary action that could include suspension or expulsion. Danny nodded, accepting his fate. There's something else, I said. If Sarah and I retake the exam, it needs to be completely new questions, nothing that either of us might have inadvertently studied. Mr. Peterson nodded. Of course. An hour later, we sat in Principal Martinez's office along with our parents. Mom had to leave work early, arriving in her diner uniform with flowers still dusting her apron. Sarah's parents looked immaculate as always, but their faces were tight with barely controlled anger though. I couldn't tell if it was directed at Danny, at Sarah, or at the situation in general. Danny's parents looked devastated. His father kept shaking his head, and his mother hadn't stopped crying since they'd arrived. Principal Martinez had listened to our story with increasing seriousness. Now he sat back in his chair, considering his options. "This is one of the most serious academic integrity violations I've dealt with in my 20 years as an educator," he said. "Mr. Jenkins, you've not only cheated, but you've compromised the integrity of the exam for other students without their knowledge or consent." Danny's father spoke up. "Principal Martinez, my son made a terrible mistake, but surely expulsion is too harsh a punishment for a first offense? This isn't just cheating on a test, Mr. Jenkins. Your son hacked into a teacher's computer system and manipulated exam content. In the real world, that would be a felony." The room went silent. I felt a stab of sympathy for Danny, despite everything he'd done. "However," Principal Martinez continued, "I'm willing to consider the circumstances. Ms. Rodriguez and Ms. Chen came forward voluntarily, which shows integrity. And Ms. Jenkins, while your actions were inexcusable, you've shown remorse and cooperated fully with our investigation." He looked at each of us in turn. "Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Jenkins, you're suspended for the remainder of the school year. You'll need to complete your coursework through independent study, and you'll not be permitted to attend graduation. Your college will be notified of the disciplinary action." Danny's mother sobbed harder, but Danny himself just nodded. "Ms. Chen and Ms. Rodriguez, you'll both retake the history exam this Friday under strict supervision. The exam will consist of entirely new questions prepared by our department head. Your original scores are nullified." "And the valedictorian position?" Sarah asked quietly. "Will be determined after the new exam scores are calculated into your GPAs. May the best student win fairly this time." Friday morning arrived with unusual spring sunshine, as if the universe was mocking the gravity of the situation. Sarah and I sat in the main office conference room, separated by enough space to prevent any possible collaboration, with Principal Martinez himself proctoring our exam. The night before, I'd called Sarah to check how she was feeling. "Nervous," she'd admitted, "but also relieved. At least, now we'll know who really deserves it." I'd felt the same way. Whatever happened, the result would be fair. The new exam questions were challenging but fair, covering material we'd both studied extensively over the course of the year. I found myself actually enjoying the process of crafting my arguments, drawing connections between historical events and their modern implications. When Principal Martinez called time after 90 minutes, I felt confident but not certain exactly how a fair exam should feel. "Results will be available Monday morning," he told us as we packed up our materials. "I'll call you both into my office to discuss the outcome." That weekend stretched endlessly. I worked my shifts at the diner, trying to distract myself from the anxiety gnawing at my stomach. Mom tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. So much of our future depended on the outcome of this one exam. On Sunday evening, Sarah texted me, "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad we handled this the right way." I texted back, "Me too. Good luck." Her response came immediately, "You too." Monday morning, Principal Martinez's office felt like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. Sarah and I sat in our usual chairs, our parents flanking us like legal counsel. The principal held 2 manila folder sore fates sealed in official school documents. "Before I announce the results," he said, "I want you both to know how impressed I am with how you've handled this situation. You could have tried to cover it up or shift blame, but instead you chose integrity over personal advantage. That speaks well of your character." My heart hammered against my ribs as he opened the first folder. "Ms. Chen, your retake score was 87%, an excellent performance." Sarah's face was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight slump in her shoulders. 87 was good, but probably not good enough to overcome the damage from the original exam. Principal Martinez opened the second folder. "Ms. Rodriguez, your retake score was 91%. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by concern for Sarah. I glanced over at her, but she was staring straight ahead. "Based on these scores and your cumulative GPAs," Principal Martinez continued, "Ms. Rodriguez, you'll be graduating as valedictorian with a final GPA of 4.847. Ms. Chen, you'll be salutatorian with a final GPA of 4.839. The margin was razor-thin, less than 1/100th of a point. In other circumstances, such a small difference might have felt unfair or arbitrary, but knowing it was earned honestly made all the difference." Sarah's parents exchanged tight-lipped looks. but Sarah herself turned to me with what looked like genuine relief. "Congratulations, Maya. You earned it." "So did you," I replied, meaning it. "You fought for it fairly, and that matters more than the title." After our parents left to discuss the paperwork with Principal Martinez, Sarah and I found ourselves alone in the hallway. "I owe you an apology," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For making you feel like you didn't deserve to win because of where you come from. For acting like my advantages made me more worthy somehow." She looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. "Danny was wrong to cheat for you, but he wasn't wrong about the playing field being uneven. I've had every advantage money can buy, and I still couldn't beat you fairly." Her honesty caught me off guard. "Sarah, you've worked hard too. You've earned everything you've achieved." "Maybe, but I never had to work a part-time job to help support my family. I never had to study in a library because my apartment was too noisy. I never had to worry about whether I could afford college." She met my eyes. "You've been fighting an uphill battle this whole time and you still won. That's not luck or cheating, that's exceptional." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." "I'm sorry, it took almost losing everything for me to realize it." We stood there for a moment, 4 years of rivalry dissolving into something that felt like mutual respect. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we graduate," I said, "and maybe, if you want, we can be friends instead of enemies." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. "I'd like that." That afternoon, I drove to Danny's house. His mother answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Maya, dear," she said, "I'm so sorry about what Danny did. I hope you know we raised him better than that." "I know you did, Mrs. Jenkins. Is he home?" She nodded, leading me to Danny's room. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen, but I could tell he wasn't really seeing it. "Hey," I said softly. He turned around, and I was shocked by how different he looked. The confident, if quiet, boy I'd known had been replaced by someone who looked broken. "Maya," he said, "I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know how sorry I am." I sat on his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Danny, what you did was wrong, but I also know you thought you were helping me." "I ruined everything," he said miserably. "My parents are devastated. Stanford revoked my admission. I'll probably have to go to community college now, if they'll even take me with this on my record." My heart ached for him, despite everything. "Danny, what you did doesn't define who you are. You made a terrible mistake, but you can learn from it and do better." "How can you be so nice to me? I violated your trust. I turned your achievement into something fake." "No, you didn't," I said firmly. "I earned my grades through my own work. You tried to give me an unfair advantage, but the knowledge was still mine. The effort was still mine. What happened with the exam was wrong, but it doesn't negate 4 years of hard work." Danny looked at me with something like wonder. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm giving it to you anyway, because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it would hurt you." We talked for another hour. I told him about the Columbia scholarship, about my plans to major in journalism, about my dreams of becoming an investigative reporter. He told me about his programming projects, his love of computer science, his shame over disappointing his parents. "Danny," I said as I prepared to leave, "you're brilliant and talented and kind. This mistake doesn't change that. You'll find your way." As I drove home, I thought about forgiveness and second chances, about the weight of good intentions and the importance of choosing integrity even when it's hard. 3 weeks later, I stood backstage in the school auditorium, wearing my cap and gown and the valedictorian medallion that felt heavier than it should. Through the curtain, I could see the packed auditorium families crowding into folding chairs, teachers lining the sides, the entire senior class arranged in neat rows on the stage. Mom sat in the front row, wearing the new dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion. She'd taken the day off work, something she rarely did, and her face was bright with pride. Next to her sat Mrs. Chen, who had insisted on coming to support both Sarah and me. Sarah found me in the wings, looking elegant in her salutatorian regalia. "Ready for your big moment?" she asked. "Nervous," I admitted. "What if I mess up my speech?" "You won't, and even if you do, it doesn't matter. You've already proven everything you need to prove." Principal Martinez appeared beside us. "It's time, ladies." The graduation ceremony was a blur of Pomp and circumstance, student speeches, and the presentation of diplomas. When my name was called as valedictorian, the applause seemed to echo forever. I saw Mom wiping away tears, saw teachers I'd had throughout high school clapping enthusiastically, saw classmates who had become friends despite our academic competition. My speech was about perseverance, about the value of hard work, and about the importance of integrity. I talked about how our achievements are only meaningful when they're earned honestly, and how the real measure of success isn't the accolades we receive, but the character we display in pursuing them. We've all faced challenges during our time at Westfield High, I said, looking out at the sea of faces. Some of us have struggled with difficult coursework, others with personal obstacles, and still others with the temptation to take shortcuts. But we're here today because we chose to keep trying, to keep learning, and to keep growing. That persistence, that commitment to doing things the right way even when it's hard, that's what will serve us well in the years ahead. I caught sight of Danny's parents in the audience. Danny himself wasn't there, of course, but they had come anyway. When our eyes met, Mrs. Jenkins smiled through her tears and nodded. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and congratulations, Sarah and I found ourselves standing together near the punch table. "Great speech," she said. "Very diplomatic way of addressing what happened without actually mentioning it." "I thought about being more direct," I admitted, "but this didn't seem like the time or place for a detailed discussion of academic ethics." "Probably wise." Sarah paused, watching as her parents posed for photos with some family friends. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think Danny will be okay?" I'd been wondering the same thing. "I hope so. He's smart and he's learned a hard lesson. Sometimes that's what it takes to set someone on the right path." I keep thinking about what might have happened if we hadn't found out, if you'd become valedictorian and I'd never known why I failed that exam. "But we did find out," I said, "and we handled it the right way. That's what matters." Sarah nodded. "I'm glad we did. Even though it was painful, I'm glad we chose honesty over convenience." "Me too." As the evening wound down and families began to disperse, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 4 years of studying late into the night, of working weekends to help pay bills, of pushing myself to excel not just in academics but in character. The valedictorian medal felt lighter now, its weight no longer that of unearned achievement but of genuine accomplishment. I'd learned that true success isn't about beating others, it's about being the best version of yourself, even when no one is watching. 1 year later, I was sitting in my dorm room at Columbia, struggling through a particularly challenging journalism ethics assignment, when my roommate handed me a letter that had arrived in the mail. The return address made me smile. Westfield Community College. "Dear Maya, I hope you're doing well at Columbia and that your studies are going smoothly. I wanted to write to thank you for visiting me before graduation and for your kindness during the worst period of my life. I'm writing from my dorm room at Westfield Community College, where I'm completing my general education requirements before transferring to a 4-year university. It's not the path I originally planned, but it's given me time to think about what I really want to do with my life and why. I've been working with a counselor here who specializes in helping students who've made serious mistakes get back on track. She's helped me understand that what I did to you and Sarah wasn't just about academic competition, it was about my own insecurity and my belief that I needed to manipulate situations to get what I wanted. I've learned that real strength comes from facing challenges honestly, not from trying to engineer outcomes in your favor. It's a lesson I wish I'd learned before I hurt people I cared about, but I'm grateful to have learned it at all. I wanted you to know that I've maintained a 4 GPA here at WCC, and I'm applying to transfer to the State University's computer science program next fall. This time, I'm earning my success the right way. I also wanted you to know that I've started volunteering with a program that teaches coding to underprivileged kids in our community. It's my way of trying to make amends not to you specifically, since I know I can't undo what I did, but to the world in general. I figure if I can help other kids succeed honestly, maybe I can balance out some of the harm I caused. Sarah stopped by to see me a few months ago. She's doing well at Northwestern and seems genuinely happy. She told me you two have stayed in touch and have become real friends. I'm glad something good came out of that awful situation. I know you don't owe me anything, and I'm not writing this letter to ask for forgiveness or friendship. I just wanted you to know that your example, the way you handled the situation with grace and integrity, has stayed with me every day since graduation. You could have been vindictive or cruel, but instead you chose compassion. That taught me more about real strength than any programming tutorial ever could. I hope your dreams of becoming an investigative journalist are coming true. The world needs people like you, people who care about truth and fairness, who are willing to do the hard work of uncovering what's right. Thank you for being the kind of person worth looking up to. Sincerely, Danny Jenkins. P.S. I've enclosed a small program I wrote. It's a digital thank you card that displays your name in scrolling text. I know it's silly, but I wanted to create something positive with the skills that once got me into so much trouble. I sat back in my desk chair, rereading the letter twice. Danny's words were thoughtful and mature, showing a level of self-reflection I hadn't expected. His journey hadn't been easy, but it sounded like he was truly learning and growing from his mistakes. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new email. Danny? Thank you for your letter. It means a lot to know that you're doing well and that you found a positive way forward. Your volunteer work sounds wonderful, and I'm proud of you for turning a difficult experience into motivation to help others. I want you to know that I never doubted your fundamental goodness, even when you made that terrible mistake. People are more than their worst moments, and you've proven that, by the way. You've handled the consequences and worked to make amends. Keep working hard and stay true to the person you're becoming. I have faith that you'll make a positive impact on the world. Also, the digital thank you card made me smile. It's beautiful, and it shows how much you've grown as both a programmer and a person. Best wishes for your continued success, Maya. After sending the email, I returned to my ethics assignment with renewed focus. The questions were complex scenarios about when to publish sensitive information, how to balance public interest with individual privacy, how to maintain integrity when facing pressure from editors or advertisers. As I worked through each ethical dilemma, I found myself thinking about my senior year of high school and the choices we'd all made during that challenging time. Danny's attempt to help me had been misguided, but his desire to see justice done wasn't entirely wrong. The playing field hadn't been level, and systemic inequalities had made my path to success more difficult than Sarah's. The difference was in how we chose to address those inequalities. Danny had tried to fix things through deception and manipulation. Sarah and I had chosen transparency and integrity, even when it was difficult and potentially costly. That distinction between expedient solutions and ethical ones would become central to my work as a journalist. In a world full of shortcuts and easy answers, the harder path of honesty and fairness was often the only one worth taking. I looked up from my textbook to the framed photo on my desk. Mom and me at graduation, both of us grinning widely as I held my diploma and scholarship certificate. The road ahead was still challenging. Journalism school was demanding, and the profession I was entering faced its own ethical struggles, but I was ready for whatever came next. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all, that true success isn't about winning at any cost, but about winning in a way that allows you to look at yourself in the mirror with pride. And no amount of external achievement could ever be worth more than that. The Valedictorian medal sat in a small frame on my bookshelf, no longer a symbol of competition conquered, but of integrity maintained. It reminded me every day that the hardest victories, the ones over our own temptations and weaknesses, are often the most important ones of all. And somewhere across the country, I knew Sarah was learning similar lessons in her own studies, while Danny was discovering that redemption was possible for those willing to do the hard work of earning it. We had all grown up that year in ways we never expected, and we were all better for it.